Hey, it's me again. Or this was me when I was in my young 20s. I believe I was either 20 or 21 at the time, but this was from my self reliance thesis for undergrad. This piece was called Reflection and actually sold for the benefits going to Haiti. And during this time, I was basically fascinated by self portraits and the whole idea of Ralph Waldo Emerson's self reliance. I was reading a lot of that. And I was really into working out during that time. Like, I think I was my smallest at that time. And this is a huge painting that I made in like 2 weeks for my show. And at the same time, I was just fascinated by the things that I love doing, that I enjoy, which is reading. And this piece was called Nerd. So transitioning out of that line of work, I was, taking care of my dad and stuff and transitioning from undergrad and I took a year off. This piece sold to a dear friend of mine. She lives in Georgia now. But yeah, it was during this time I was just underneath a lot of stress. So come grad school, this is from Wisconsin when I'm in grad school, I was really, really, really depressed because I had just lost my dad and then I had cut myself off from family. I wasn't talking to anybody. So I just stuck to making these portraits. And I eliminated my eyes out, not so that there's no attention on just my face or a regular proportional portrait, but I was just really, really not well. Mentally, I was not well, so I engaged myself in my artwork. These were 8 by 8 canvases, so they were very small. They might look large on the screen, but they were really tiny. And I was looking at Susanna Coffee. I was told to look at a lot of artists, but I just constantly stuck to the self portraits of myself. Sometimes I might look like a man, and sometimes I just looked like I was vanishing in the background. I did a lot of monochromatic colors, and I didn't really care about my palette. It's just that it was what I was into doing. And the intensity that I was feeling, very lonely, a lot of pressure, I just started playing around with myself as the subject. I could have drawn or painted anything I wanted to if I had like a series of work, but I was taking these portraits further. And then, this one has like an eerie feeling to it where this is where I was kind of like, okay, I felt like the loneliest person in the world. And then I would flip back and forth with like, I would say like color studies on how to make, myself as a self portrait look like a sculptural, like 3 dimensional object on a flat surface. So I was putting like dirt and sand and sugar in some of these pieces. And I think this was around the final year, grad school. I was just really doing a lot of monochromatic work. And then I went even monochromatic within same color families. This one was very eerie, where I'm kind of like really, really, really blended into the background almost, as if you don't know if that's a person there or whatnot. And yeah, I just had a lot of vulnerability during this time. And so, come around the final time, like about to graduate and everything, I took the monochromatic colors, tertiary colors, and, I just made these stools and piled them up behind myself. This is when I was in my studio. I did live in my studio briefly while studying and engaging myself in this work. But it was a lot of color mixing, and, I eliminated my face completely. I was just engaged in the work of like the work ethic and how to make a portrait read for what it is without showing expression on one's face. This one was a 30 by 30, I believe. That I made a lot of square canvases from scratch. Again, monochromatic colors, a lot of I think I used a really dark blue and just mixed off from there. And then, like I said, I'm into the metaphysical and stuff. Talking to yourself to encourage yourself or having a conversation with yourself. Or, it's like I'm talking to God here. But like I used the table as a place of congregation. I was reading, scripture, of course, and then I went back to somewhat perceptual color, and I elongated my face or my neck in this portrait. But I was playing with the texture of the oil paint, so I used a lot of oil paint in this one. And yeah, I would sketch from time to time, but in this portrait, you could kind of tell like I'm not happy, I'm not sad, but then it's just like, look, I'm just trying to get my work done here. I never really finished this one, but it was a sketch. So later, a few years later, I did like a whole bunch of these portraits, by the way. I just morphed into putting these bands on my face where I'm just like kind of like the base of the background. And there's no reason for why I did the stripes. Perhaps they represent something spiritual. And in this one, it's just kind of like where I'm saying, okay, I have finally graduated within myself with these portraits using royal color purple, saying bye. And so I do photography. I like having fun with the cameras, especially out in nature. I'm really into nature. One of my first areas of painting was in landscape. And yeah, I just was behind all these wildflowers and I decided to do some self portraits. And I wore some light makeup that day, but the point of the matter is I was just embracing nature for what was in front of me. And again, how I connect to nature as if I'm looking at nature for the very last time, as if, I don't know if I'll ever see this tree again or if I'll see these flowers again. And I need to embrace them for what they are and love them